terms of brass tacks, somebody shows up and they want to participate and they don't know where they should be and what level. When they come in, what sort of assessment do you give them, and what does that look like for a first-time student trying to get placed?
We start with an informal assessment. We start with asking questions, very simple ones like what color is this, what is this? And if they can deal with those questions, moving up to a more complex one, do you have a cat? Tell me about the cat. And then we get an idea, is this a beginner? Is this a basic? Is this an intermediate? Is this possibly an advanced student? And then we move to a formal written test. The written test comes back and we mark it, and they're told no help, no phone, no dictionary. And we look at it, and then we're thinking, okay, we've got a better idea now, but we're still not sure. So let's say they've done very well on a basic level test. The next question is this a high basic student, or is this maybe a low intermediate student? So back to the informal questions as we try to decide, will they be able to pass an oral comprehension test? And if the answer is no, then that's it, they're high basic. If the answer is yes, then we'll go to an oral test. And we have some people who are very, very good at oral tests. And if they're available, they're the ones we want to do the test. Then back comes, and they write down the entire answer. So we have a record of sentence structure and grammar, and then we're assessing it. You know, how good is their oral skills? And Mary Hogan, who's the head of our program, always says, put the oral skills as a greater weight than the written skills.
Wow, that's very important. So there's oral components, there could be written reading components. That's great. So I'm sure people get sorted into just the sort of place that they would need to be.
Not exactly.
Sometimes.
We do a good job of it, but we probably have maybe 10% of students. So we always tell them, when you go to the class, if it's too easy or too hard, come back and tell us.
Okay. Yeah. And so what about a natural process without them communicating that to you? They're in class for some time. They've been here for 6 months. Well, presumably this ESL program is helping them, and they feel like, or maybe you feel like, they're ready to move on. How do you assess the process of when a student should go up to the next class?
The teachers do that. They're the ones who are working with the student, and they can see the progress. And so if the teacher thinks the student's ready to move up, they will talk to this student about moving up, and the student will come up to the registration desk and get a transfer form. And on it, they'll say what their name is, who their current teacher is, why do they want to move? Do they want to move up or down, higher or lower, harder level, easier level? And then that slip goes to the teacher they're with, and the teacher puts it in their folder, and Mary, who's the head of the department, collects it at the end of the day. But the teacher can also send a note up to us or drop a question and say, I think this student is ready to move up. I'm not sure, would you do another test with them? Or a student can come to us directly and say, I want to move up or down. And then we will give them a transfer sheet, and we might test accordingly, and we'll refer back to their teacher to find out what the teacher thinks of this move.
Now, you mentioned when a student comes in, it could also be after the first day, they understand that they feel like they should move up. What happens when you disagree? What happens when a student says, oh, this is too easy for me, I'm ready to move up, and the teacher says, no way? Or when you say to them, well, I think you're ready to move up now, and no, I'm not capable, I really would like to stay at the lowest level possible. What do you do when you're on a different page than the student?
We try to convince them.
Yeah, okay.
And we tell them, you know, you're not going to learn English quickly enough if you're at too easy a level. You really need to be challenged. Or we might say, this class is really too difficult for you. You're going to be lost. Start at the lower one, and you're not committed to that for the whole year. When you build up a confidence level and your teacher thinks you're ready, you can move up. But if the student's still resistant, then we'll say, okay, here's the lower level or here's the higher level. Go and try it for the full lesson, which is 2 hours, or half the lesson 1 hour before break or after break, and see what you think, and then come back and talk to us. And if they still persist and are in tears, then we give in.
I think that's fair. Yeah, no crying. Uh, what would a time frame look like? How often would a student typically move over the course of a year or 6 months? What does it look like?
I guess most students are going to stay at the level they are for the year.
Okay.
But a good percentage are going to come in and be ready to move up, and teachers will say, we'll be ready to move up. And then at the end of the year, the teachers will make huge lists called promotion lists saying, okay, these students come September are ready to move up. These ones are not.
Yeah. How do they feel about that? Are they quite happy to stay where they are? Or do they feel like, why am I not graduating?
You are right. They are happy to stay where they are. They like their teacher and they don't want to leave that teacher. Yeah.
That's very interesting. I can understand that dynamic. One final question. Imagine you have two people who come for ESL. They could be a couple, they could be friends who travel to the country together, and they want to be in the same class, but they're at wildly different levels.
Okay. Wildly different levels. We tell them you get to see each other before class, at break, after class, because the church lets the students stay there and chat. And you're really not going to learn well. So if you're the higher student and you're spending all your time explaining to the lower level student what's going on, you're not learning yourself. It's not a good situation.
That's great. Thank you very much, Ros. Make sure you're noting registration questions. We're going to come back at the end and make sure that there might be some nuances here you want to get at. Thank you very much. I'm going to jump actually up to the screen here. You know, you can just dump that wherever you please there, Ros. Mary-Jane, welcome. If I could find all of the notes that I just dumped all over the floor, Mary-Jane is going to start us talking about the challenges with the students themselves. The number one question that gets asked every year at SOCEM: what do you do with the one student who dominates the conversation?
Okay, well, you can do a few things. What I try to do is start with body language. So try to break eye contact with that student. You can glance away, you can glance towards the next person who's having a turn. You try to find a point of pause and try to briefly summarize what that student is saying, and then turn your body away from them towards another person or to the rest of the group and say, what do others think? Or let's hear from someone else. If you know ahead of time that a student tends to be more dominating, we are in a conversation circle. So then I will make sure I don't sit beside that person. I'm sorry, I make sure I don't sit across from that person. Instead, I will sit beside. And that also is a way to have less eye contact with that person. And another body language is just gently holding out your hand. If they're about to speak and you want to hear from someone else, and just say, oh, well, let's first hear from so-and-so. Or if they're going on, you say, okay, well, why don't we next hear from so-and-so? So just in a gentle way, those different body language things are helpful. Another way that I try to approach it is just using a pattern of turn taking within the class itself. So everyone does have an opportunity to speak. And then if there's one person who speaks a lot, then when it is someone else's turn, I will try to give them more time. So I may ask the other people more follow-up questions so that it's a little more equalized in terms of time that is each person has approximately a similar amount of time to speak. And a direct approach can also be used and may be warranted. So just reminding the class or the group itself that we want everyone to have an equal amount of time, or everyone should have the opportunity to speak. That's the idea of our conversation. And at the end of class or outside of the formal class, can also approach the student who speaks quite a bit and say, you know, we do want everyone to be able to have an equal amount of time to speak. Would you help me to keep track of that? And without really saying it's you who's talking too much, you are getting them to be your helper to make sure that happens. And they generally do a great job with that. And it gives them an added sense of responsibility.
That's excellent. I've definitely heard the "will you be my helper" approach. If you give someone a marker, to write things down, it can take away from the talking time. That's great. Now, what about the opposite problem? A person who's here every week, they are happy to be there, they want to be a part of the class, but unless you really go out of your way, they don't want to talk very much. Maybe they're shy or self-conscious.
Yeah, so again, with the body language, just specifically making eye contact with those quieter members, reaching out to them specifically, saying their name, just tone of voice, interested and encouraging to hear from them. And try to just start with simple questions, because if it is a confidence or a hesitancy, then just a question that's a yes or no, or with a simple brief response is less intimidating for them, or something that doesn't have a right or wrong answer, something that's likely to be correct when you're asking for an example of something. Also just asking after someone else has spoken, do you have anything to add? And then that person can say yes or no. And if they would rather not say anything, they just say no. So we're not giving them undue pressure. If the shy person is fairly new to the class and they are still also taking in how things are being run, then I go around the circle in the conversation circle, then I would ask them last. So they have the opportunity to see how it works and to hear from other people. And then, okay, now you have a turn. And then sometimes they'll say, oh, same answer as so-and-so. So they have a way to not talk too much if they're not quite comfortable to do so. Another part is just paying attention to the atmosphere of the class, just finding ways to promote belonging and acceptance by encouraging, by welcoming people. Also reminding the class in general that it's okay to make mistakes, that we're here to learn. That can reduce some pressure, especially some students come in and they don't want to make mistakes. They're not comfortable with that, and just, yeah, part of learning will be making mistakes, and that's okay. That can take pressure off of them. So.
Yeah, I'm sure pressure is a big part of it for a lot of new students. Here's another, I think, very common one. It could be in the case of two people who come together. You're in a conversational setting, and two people are sitting next to each other of varying skill levels, or perhaps they speak the same first language. If one person is really doing a lot of explaining and really a lot of talking to the person beside them, how do you navigate those sort of side conversations in the middle of a class?
Just starting off by reminding everyone that the class is to be in English only, that we're here for English class, not other language class. So we want to encourage the students to try to speak in English, even if it's challenging for them. We can also, as a teacher, try to indicate that we are here for answering questions. So if we notice that there's someone who is being helped, so a bit of a lower level student, try to find a way for them to direct their questions to you. So it could be just specifically checking in with that student, like, are you okay with what I just said or explained? So that they're not relying on another student for that role. So then by giving them possibly some extra attention, then they can come to see that you are the teacher. We don't want to force people to separate, but the best way is to try to separate them. So maybe not to sit beside each other, or maybe not to be in the same class if they are at different levels. But that's a bit of a tricky one, because we also like it if they're making friends, and we understand that but they are comfortable to be together. But I would say just that reminder that we want to be focusing on our English and that you as the teacher are there to answer different questions, and if they're accepting to even just separate them within their physical proximity.
Mm. I think along that lines, what's the policy around sort of pocket devices where people are translating things in real time?
Yeah, so yeah, what I notice people like to do it, I try to encourage and say, well, let's just put that away and let's just try to figure it out in English, or have another student try to explain it in English to people. But a device, like if we can find a picture, that can really help. But I try to discourage the use of any sort of translation device, because we're here to try to convey it to you and to teach you. And as a group, let's see if we can try to figure it out. There are, though, situations where a student who speaks the same native language will say, oh, it's this. And then suddenly there is that understanding. And I have to accept that because that happens pretty quickly. So, but in general, I try to say, let's just try to see if someone else can explain to you what this means, or I can try to explain in a different way.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I can see how pictures would help as well. I think that's probably a fair use. Uh, I asked a similar question to Ros around the registration implications, but from a student management perspective, what do you do when you have a student that's ready to go up and they're not particularly willing to advance?
Yeah, that we encounter that a lot. And I've observed that that situation often relates to student confidence. So I try to generally compliment the student, give positive feedback, say, this is really what I've noticed you've improved on. And often my line is, this group is getting too easy for you. There's another group that I'd like to encourage you to try. And then that's the second part, similar to what Ros said, just encourage them to try a higher level group, but with the assurance that they can come back. So if it's too difficult, they can come back. We don't want to force them to go to another group, and just having patience for them. The student may need to think about it, give them a week, then approach them again the next week and say, yeah, remember we talked about trying another group, would you like to try that? And then they will warm up to that idea. But we find generally a trial of 1 to 2 weeks in the other group works, and then they discover the other teacher is nice, the other students are nice, and they're comfortable then to move up to that level that we've noticed that they seem to be ready for. There could be a few things to try to increase that comfort in moving. With our volunteers do teach at different levels. So they may already know a teacher that they've had in the beginner group who also teaches in more of an intermediate group on a different week. So then, oh, remember, you already know this teacher. Or maybe there's another student who's moving up as well. You know that student, look, that person is in that group too. So the relationship part then doesn't have to be entirely removed when they move on to another group.
Yeah, I can see how confidence and relationship can be those pivotal pieces. Just one more question for you. When we're considering a specific curriculum that we've set out, and perhaps there's an activity, a game, something hands-on that you really feel is pivotal to understanding what you're doing and where you're going and how to understand the lesson, and somebody just doesn't want to participate. They might think it's childish or embarrassing. What is the way to sort of encourage participation outside of just speaking?
Sure. Well, the first thing, I wouldn't want to force the student. So that would be the first part, because you want them to have a good experience in class and come back. If the teacher is able to convey the purpose in such a way that the student can appreciate the value of that activity, that can go a long way for the student. If it is something that kids do too, you could just outright, when you're explaining what the activity will be, that you can say, yeah, this is a common kids activity and it's kind of fun even for all ages. So I've kind of adjusted it a bit that it can work for us to practice this. Then it's kind of already out there that this is maybe something silly, and everybody is getting that same introduction to know that we're going to be doing something not that we usually do. If the student is refusing or reluctant, what I will try to do is demonstrate the activity first. So I'm just thinking like tongue twisters, I'll do it first because it is embarrassing. Then they see that I've done it. Other students then, who's ready to try it next? So encourage the other students to do it, and the reluctant student can watch and see how others do it, and that may make them to the point of being comfortable enough to try themselves. But if at the end of all that demonstration and watching everyone else, that student just wants to observe, then I would accept that and just see that they'll gain some sort of learning from observing, even though we want them to participate too, but we would just allow them to be an observer for that one. If it's a repeated pattern, the student never wants to participate in the practical activities that we have, then outside of class, we could maybe talk with them and ask like, what is the hesitation, and see if there's a way that we can work around their specific situation. What is it that is making them hesitate?
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. Make sure and register in your mind some student-related questions. Finally, we come to Linda. Linda, we're going to be reflecting on challenges with volunteers. This is probably in the running for our #1 challenge. How do you recruit teachers? And when they come, what training experience are you expecting them to be coming in with?
I jumped to what are the problems, or how do I recruit teachers? I didn't plan for that one, but I work at a college, and these students need field education, they need practical service, they need their ministry placement, and I also have people in the community who've heard about, who maybe are working in churches, and so they want to jump in as well. So I have adults, and then I have college level students, and I don't completely get to recruit the college. They come to me, and I need to, if they're in and taking the formal TESOL class, I need to use them. And but if they're in the community, I do screen them, and that's what I would talk about. I just think one of the main things I do see is, after having lots of different problems, all different kinds of things, coming late, leaving early, being friendly or over friendly, I came up with a document that clarifies my expectations. And I guess that's the main thing I would say to you, is that, and then I've run that by my supervisor so that we're in agreement. He's going to back me up if I have a problem. And I think that then I can recruit people to a specific thing that they can see what the qualifications are, what the expectations are. I have over the years clarified what we're trying to do, everything from, do you want them to set up tables, and do you want them to help make tea, to I've had to clarify with the college students what you're going to wear, because they'll have their ball cap on backwards and their jeans all ripped up. And we work with a lot of Japanese, very, very well dressed, very well educated. So I've had to clarify that you have to look as nice and be as prepared as they are. So that's how I recruit. You asked me a second question as well related to that.
Well, around what expectations they're coming in with, which sounds quite specific in your context, but also wondering about what sort of training that you would offer, maybe things that they don't come in with that you say, here's what I can offer to you once you're here.
For sure. And I actually think my expectations began when I worked in the public library system. And suddenly I had people from the community that wanted to teach, and I realized that they were going to for sure close down any kind of spiritual influence we would have. So I realized I needed to clarify, even, are you a Christian or non-Christian? How was I going to screen? Also background checks on somebody who's from the community who who I just wasn't feeling that good about. So yes, I clarified them way back when I worked in the public library, in the church context, and now in the school. I think no matter which context you're in, you need to have in your brain what's going to be your qualifications for who you're going to accept as a volunteer and who you're not. The reason being because you can get quite a ways into this, and I did in the public library with a gentleman who was not a Christian, who basically wanted to take over the whole thing and have it go in his direction. And God just sovereignly brought us out of that. But yeah, I think you have to. Then when I get them together, we have teachers meetings at the beginning, in the middle, at the semester end, and I am training them. I think you have to model for your volunteers exactly what it is you expect them to do and how you expect them to do it. For example, that's why I have here, Marian Chang wrote the wonderful conversation guides. I highly recommend them to you if you haven't seen them. But how do you use that? And you have to show them that it's not about you talking, it's about you pitching questions. And so I would role play that with somebody who's done it a few times before. And then we take a break, we play a lot of games, like I threw in here, this is just bananagrams or bingo. How do I expect that we're going to use games? How are we going to use teaching grammar? And I'm teaching, instructing, modeling, but it's really, really fun. I see my job more and more as to equip the saints for the work of ministry. I have to, I'm getting older here, train young people that are going to go around the globe to teach English. People in our community, showing them how they can do this more effectively in their community by modeling it, getting a whiteboard out, going over all the steps, teaching, showing, going over grammar, playing a game with them. I'm very much also into having fun. And if we're not having fun, our students are not having fun, they're not going to come back again. So doing, like Jennifer was doing, a movie clip, all kinds of variety of situations that show our students how to be effective.
Yeah, effective and fun. I like that. Picking up on something you said, what happens when those expectations for a teacher are not met? And it could be in the realm of being ill-prepared, of not understanding the direction, not agreeing with the direction, not forging relationships with the students. When those expectations come up short, then what are the conversations like?
Well, and that's where, again, I'm so glad I have a document that, and it's the document is developed out of all the problems that I've had over the years. So I can go back to and review, first of all, with the whole group in a training session. Oh, let's all remember that these are our expectations. I actually have one of these situations coming up right now, and I can go back to the document and said, we talked about not exchanging personal information with a gentleman in our group. She's a woman, and you violated this. So, how I'm glad that I have previously laid out. So you want people to know where's the baseline of what my expectations were, and now you cross that. And so then I have to figure out, oh my goodness, is this something I can gently put in an email? And I think they need to see your face. So I usually rule that out, and I have to say something, either kind of slip it into a conversation and just remind it gently, or sometimes I have to have especially with students, a more direct conversation. I try to bring them back to the expectations. We've agreed on this, you've signed up for this, you've agreed to this, so let's bring it back to the expectations. If somebody just cannot or will not, I'll be looking for the exit ramp. I may need to walk it through to the end of the semester, thank them for a really great job, or maybe at the end of the year if I really have to go that long. And you always want to thank them. They are God's people. They're serving to the best of their abilities, but then the next time around, maybe just having another volunteer that would be more willing to comply with what you're hoping to accomplish.
Yeah, I think it sounds like those expectations being set out up front really make a lot of sense, something to refer to. I think for a lot of us, we're happy to have any volunteer at all. Thinking of different ESL contexts, what are the primary issues that come up with teacher or facilitator commitment when folks are sort of just showing up when they like, you should be happy that I'm giving you whatever time I'm giving you at all?
I'm thinking about during the pandemic, online. People are coming and going, and I'm there every week, 8 hours a week on Zoom. I give them roles. I don't let them off that easy. So if they have a part they have to play next week, a part of the lesson plan. So we're rotating through all of us. We're really talking about being the body and being a team, and we're going to have a team meeting even 15 minutes before Zoom. You've got this, right? You've got the movie clip. You've got this. You've got that. You're doing breakout. So I don't let them off so easy. I think by getting the volunteer to play a part, and we rotate those roles, and I figure out who's really good at something. But yeah, I give them a role. And when I'm in person as well, I have an expectation that by the end of the semester, the students will be almost carrying the class. But let's see, if you have one volunteer, you better get along really well. And yeah, you've pretty much got to teach the class yourself while that person is helping you, and then getting them up on, and I have done this. I've done whole 100-hour internships with one person, and it's worth it. If that person is going to go on to the mission field or to a local community and completely replicate it, it's well worth my time to equip one person to further the gospel of Christ in their community. Oh yes, that's worth it.
Yeah. Certainly investing that time, you can see how far it can replicate.
The paper is entitled Euphony as a Central Component of Quality. It's part of the Quality in Translation and Multi-Threaded Fabric volume.
Getting down to specific issues, we talked about what do you do with the dominant student. What do you do with the teacher who talks more than the students, who dominates their own class?
As a central component.
And I would go back to the expectations, but a lot of times I will teasingly talk about that. My husband is a wonderful pastor. He's a president of a college. He taught me, Linda, life is about asking other people questions. And he said to me, you don't need to learn how to talk a lot. You need to learn how to listen and ask other people questions. This is a life skill. So I will repeat again with all the leaders, or even with that person, it's about pitching the ball to them. And it's an hour. Oh, I know that's very, very tiring, but your whole job is to take the SOCEM guide, figure out your next question while they're talking, and pitch that question. That's your job. That's your role.
Yeah. Just one more question in this field. The big one, and we talked about this a little bit this morning. What do you do with a teacher who is uninterested or unwilling to participate in Bible-based programs when what you're doing is faith-based, and perhaps you do have a mix of Christian and non-Christian teachers? How do you approach that?
I have had this person, and she opposed me incredibly, giving me reasons why we weren't doing what we had on the website. And during COVID, we did start a website. I just held my ground with things like Matthew 28:20, go into all the world and preach the gospel, or Acts 1:8, you will be my witnesses, or Romans 1:16, for I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God unto salvation. I'm saying we're working with people here, mostly from Japan, Korea, Middle East. They are never going to hear the gospel if right now, during this 1 year they have here on a tourist visa or whatever, I need to share the gospel. I do believe in Colossians, it talks about let your speech be seasoned with salt. None of us like the whole salt shaker dumped on us. So I like to just season it, just lightly putting in touches of the gospel. I don't do it right at the beginning of the school year in September. I probably will start about now in November, light salt shaker, see how it goes. We did offer a Bible study during COVID and again last year, so they have another option, so I don't overdo it in the Bible study classes, and that's optional for them, but there was a lot of them that took it. She just really pushed back, and then after a while she said to me, I'm so glad you didn't give in. So even she had a huge respect for me. She went on to actually do a different ministry at this time, but I felt like she could just kind of watch what we were doing, watch that I wasn't pushing it on people, nor was I hiding my light that we wouldn't do this. She's gone on to another ministry. but a wonderful relationship. In John 4, it talks about those who sow and reap will rejoice together. And I tried to say, this is a lot of fun. And I find gospel sharing, maybe I have the gift of evangelism, is just a ton of fun. And I like to see all the students that are learning, all the people in the community that are working with us, just to see the joy of the gospel and sharing and partnering together. Again, I had to clarify my expectations, tweak my document a little bit, that we are going to do some gospel approaches. Not everything we do is Bible-based. It's not. We do a lot of the SOCEM guides from Carol Blake. I do pronunciation pairs. But even pronunciation pairs, I did teach a class at the University of Waterloo one day, and I was just teaching the TH, the voiced and the voiceless TH. And I said, God, just let it show on my face. And we had to do ethnography and anthropology, and then we did theology. And so I went back and defined those terms. And I had 2 Chinese students come up to me and say, can you get me a Bible? I think it can show on our faces. I think that the light of Christ shines out of us in all we do, whether we can say it. You might be in a really tightly controlled program, as you would be if you went to some of our dear countries overseas, or you might be in a country where you can just say whatever you want to say, but I think Christ shines out of us, and I think that this is called the Southern Ontario Cooperative of ESL Ministry, and I think we need to have a ministry to meet their practical needs, but to meet their spiritual needs. I've actually had a couple students say to me, why didn't you tell me more? And they had to go to somebody else to get the whole gospel, and that shames me too.
Yeah, I mean, our policy always was, if we can represent our faith winsomely, and if we have a good contingent of Christian teachers, then there's no reason that a volunteer can't discover Jesus in the same way a student would. So there's opportunities for that as well.
As long as that person is not so opposing to you.
No, of course. I mean,
I've had that guy. Yeah.
Yeah, if they're shouting through you talking about Jesus.
Yeah, I'm going to report you to the, yeah.
Thank you very much, Linda. I appreciate that tremendously. I just want to save some time for questions, which we're going to move to right now. So we have some topics here. We have registration and students and volunteers. As we ask questions, we're going to have 2 options. We're going to have some online folks. So someone at the back can wave to me about some online questions coming in. Otherwise, we don't have a portable microphone. You can make your way down the center aisle and to the microphone. Welcome to the microphone. Has anyone ever had a problem in leading ESL ministry? Marion's laugh was no, I'm fine. Yeah, what about shyness in the teachers? That's a good point. Any questions? Any online, anything? Oh, here we go.
My name is Ruth. I'm from North Toronto, and we are a volunteer group that just, because we love people, we love the Lord, and we love language. What we're struggling with many a time is the groups are not homogenous. They don't stay. So every week we get a couple of new ones. And we have 2 groups. We have one group that's doing conversational, and we're doing one group that's more on the grammar side. And I'm doing the part that's more on the grammar side, and I'm struggling with having new people and knowing how to integrate them, how to keep a program, how to make progress. And I don't know if any of you can give me some tips on that.
Great question. We represent quite a wide range of types of ESL. My group was completely conversational, and therefore we would probably have 10 people show up new every week, and we knew 6 of them we would never see again. Not because what we were doing was wrong. They're just passing through. They just happened to be on or they were looking for more intense teaching, or they were looking for a different style. And so part of what we did was we just understood what we were. Because we were a conversational English group, what's the maximum English impact that we can have? What's the maximum ministry impact that we can have in a short amount of time, knowing that that's sometimes once a week or only the single week. And then as you notice students that are staying longer, then there's a different approach and come to my house and eat dinner and such. But I wonder if specific to the question of when you're trying to teach something like grammar, is there something that you can do to have an impact knowing that somebody might not be there for a very long stretch?
I do some of this, but Rosalind, maybe you have. Can she hear?
Yeah, no, go ahead, Linda.
So I tried more and more to bring consistency to the whole group so that the new people come in, meet the people who were there last week in the conversation groups. And I, again, try to do a bit of what you do, sort them out by levels, because you can't, a beginner and an advanced student together is difficult. So I quickly sort them out. We do maybe 45 minutes to an hour of conversation using the SOCEM guides. Then we take a tea break, everybody's mingling, and then everybody sits down at various levels as well, and we do a fun activity, we do some grammar. So we call it, and it is from the ACE TESOL certification program, a warm-up, a study focus, something we're looking at intensely, something that we practice, like a practice sheet, and then an activate, which is another kind of game or an activity where we in real life use that. But I think I'm wondering if maybe your groups could combine with different time slots that keeps it moving for everybody through different things, so that the new people might be integrated with the older people who have been coming. I don't know what would help that retention. Is that one of the issues you're asking about, is just how to retain the students?
I just don't want to go over the same material with new people for the old people to not, they haven't been here.
Yeah.
And I don't know what level the new people are at when they first walk in the door. So I don't know where to begin.
Okay. 3 weeks ago, we had 3 people walk in from the Congo. They knew no English. And then we had more advanced ones. But last week on those study practice sheets, we had them all together at one table. I thought, how in the world is this all going to go? It was an evening working people's class and group, a lot of men. And it was amazing how people helped people. But most of the class was not together, but that last study practice sheet and more of an applied activate, they were together. And I was amazed how the students themselves helped each other. And yes, you have to keep proceeding. You can't just because if somebody does stay, they're going to get frustrated that it's not moving forward. Yeah. So we do a different verb tense or a different point of grammar every time. And we just keep going with this semester. If they get prepositions, they get what they get. Yeah, but then we might take a Bible passage and circle all the prepositions, example in the book of John, and apply it, and then they could use prepositions. But yeah, I don't know that you can just keep staying in one place. That gets frustrating. You have to keep moving on to a new tense, a new topic.
And it does sound too like a little bit of sorting might be helpful, right? So even if it was a 1-question test when somebody walks in, tell me about your experience in Toronto. And based on the answer to that question, you're a 1 or a 2, or you're maybe a 1, 2, or 3. There might be something along these lines.
What I've been doing is just doing review with the people. So when the new people come in, I just go around the circle and ask them to count 1 to 20. And then I go over, everybody says A, B, C. And depending on how quickly they say it and how comfortable they are to say it gives me an idea of what level they're at.
And certainly I agree. You have to have a year's curriculum or some amount of time that you're not doing the same. We had people that were there for 5 years and they said, I think I've seen this conversation sheet before. Well, you've been here for 5 years. I don't have 250 conversation sheets.
There's a lot of them, but not that many.
Folks, I don't want to impinge on your lunch. Can we thank our panelists? You're going to get to have lunch with them now, so I imagine there might be some more time to catch up and speak. I have some more announcements. This will be our last announcement session. There's no time to come back here. We're going to do lunch. We're going to do our final session, and then you're free to go. So these are the last things that I have to tell you. Display tables. I think we have 3. There's one right out here in the registration area, and there's 2 more in the basement. Very likely lunch will be the last time you get to see most of these materials, so don't wait till the very end of the day, or things very well might be packed up. There's some boxes of donated ESL books that I believe are offered for free. Yeah, just out here. And so do browse those. Those were donated, and you can take what you like. There's some things at the different tables that are for sale. There's some over here that are for sale. So please use your lunchtime to take a look at those. Evaluation forms. Please fill out those evaluation forms with all 3 workshops, and there is a box very clearly labeled at registration to leave them. Please leave your name tags. There's no reason to waste all this plastic. They are great reusers. So I'm sure you can take the little paper part, but leave the plastic. It would be greatly appreciated. Now, I will note 3 different people have given me this note since I agreed to do the announcements. We would love some help cleaning up and tearing down. There's a few things that need to be put back. So if you're available to stay for just a few minutes after, maybe we'll congregate in the registration area and put some people to work to make this a group effort. As you know, this is quite a low-cost conference, so any help of people pitching in is very helpful. Let me pray for our food as we go to lunch. Lord, thank you for this day. We are here for you. We're so grateful for you. We pray that in the same way that you have nourished our minds and our spirits today, that you would nourish our bodies, that you would make connections with our brothers and sisters for the work of the gospel, for the work of ESL ministry. Would you be at work at lunch? Would you be at work through this final session? Would you come and have your way among us and cause us to respond to your Holy Spirit? In Jesus' name, amen.